Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar today. We are very happy to have you here, of course, in this academic and, of course, important meeting today. So before we start the webinar and before I introduce our guest today, I want to invite you to our conference this year. Of course, this is a reminder. So this is a reminder. So we want to remind you and, of course, invite you to participate in our annual conference this year. This year, the conference will take place in Bucaramanga at Universidad Industrial de Santander. So you are very welcome here. We will have three main themes this year, saberes locales, diversities, and AI. So we strongly invite you to participate and to join us and to find all the information on our website. So having said that, we move on. So I'm gonna introduce our conference today, our presenter today. So it is an honor for me to introduce Professor Alber Josué Forero-Mondragón. He's my friend, of course. He's my colleague. So Alber Josué Forero-Mondragón is a full professor at Universidad Distrital Francisco José Caldas. He holds a master in applied linguistics and a bachelor degree in English language and teaching, both from the same university. He's a researcher affiliated with the group Stupoli. His current interests include English literature education, teacher identity, and hip hop pedagogies. So we are very happy to have Professor Mondragon Forero-Mondragón here, and he will share his presentation about hip-hop based counter storytelling, redefining characters and plots in English literature education. So thank you very much, Professor Alber Josué. We have so of course we have your presentation, and maybe at the end we will have some time for your questions. So I invite you to type your questions on the chat. And the stage is yours, Professor Mondragon. Thank you very much.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Gwen, for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you for inviting me to taking part in these spaces. I have found them very useful, very insightful for our community to foster alternative perspectives into our practices. Let me just share my screen, please. Can you please confirm if you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it's an honor. The honor is mine to tell you about something that I feel really passionate about, and something that I have been working on for the last few years, which is this construct of hip-hop based counter storytelling as connected to English literature education. And I have decided to place this verb, redefining, here because I actually think there is, this is an area of inquiry where we can have some kind of alternatives that can make our learning, teaching, and assessment experiences more meaningful and transformative. Let me tell you about the journey we're sharing today. So this is like an overview of the webinar. I would call it more like a conversation. If you feel like, engaging with what I am saying, don't feel ashamed. You can open your microphone, because I think this is very important, listening to each other. So I will start this talk with an icebreaker. Later, I will let you know the positionality from which I am speaking when I'm talking about hip-hop based counter storytelling. After that, I will share with you my problematization of some taken for granted, let's say, practices in English literature education. After that, I will address like an exploration of the area of inquiry. After that, based on research-based examples, I will try to approach this construct of hip-hop based counter storytelling. Later, I will address some possibilities and implications. And finally, we will have like a space for questions and answers, but remember that you can jump into any moment of my presentation. Well, just to start, I would like you to please scan this QR code that takes you to a Menti activity. I would like you to briefly define, I know that is difficult, but let's try to do our best. With 2 or 3 words or short phrases, your learning experiences with English literature. In case you cannot scan the QR code, I am going to share this link with you. Give me a second. So in the chat, you can also find the link. Yes. Okay. So I am going to give you 2 minutes. So please be honest. Don't worry. No one is going to know who you are. This is anonymous. And after that, I will share on the screen some of your answers. This is going to end up in a Word cloud, so we can. I am sure we can see very interesting ideas there. Okay, so let's talk in 2 minutes. Okay, dear colleagues, 1 minute to wrap it up. Well, 30 seconds left. Okay, well, let's stop it there because of time constraints. I am going to share my view. So, well, this is what we got. Interesting. It is interesting to see from the words and phrases you put down here that we have different approaches, or let's say different experiences. Perhaps they intersect with each other, but we can see the uniqueness of our experiences, which is a very important element, by the way, when it comes to talking about counter storytelling, and today, well, hip hop based counter storytelling. So we can see here words that describe your experiences, let's say from diverse angles and the diverse type of experiences, some positive, if I may say so, some negative. Well, it also depends on our perspective on this, into this area. So, well, basically, I can tell you that I share with you some of those, let's say, descriptors, and well, knowing these perspectives you have is pivotal for engaging with the content of this webinar. Okay, so thank you for participating in this initial activity. Now, I am going to tell you a little bit about my perspectives, and in order to do it, I'm going to start by talking about my positionality. So it's important to do it basically because I want you to understand that the perspectives I am sharing with you today are situated in the intersections between the multiple identities and the multiple affiliations I hold. Um, because, well, I cannot separate the dimensions of my identity that are embedded or that are involved in the ideas I am presenting today. I decided to put hip hop culture on top, basically because I would say that it is the the trigger. It is the reason why I have become a teacher educator, a critical applied linguistics researcher, and well, someone that values public education and public educational spaces particularly. And finally, that hip hop is also has also been a trigger for me to become a social justice advocate. So let me tell you that in all these sites and my affiliations to the practices embedded in these sites I am talking about, made my perspectives, the perspectives I'm sharing with you today, relative, subjective. So with this, I want to say that what I am sharing with you is not a universal approach on how to draw on hip hop and counter storytelling in order to reimagine or redefine English literature education, sorry, but it's just a perspective, okay? And well, the idea is that by the end, we can have a space to discuss and maybe to share our divergences, because these are also welcome. So my perspective into my experiences with the learning, or let's say the study of English literature, are central in problematizing some taken for granted practices, but also my experiences teaching it and researching it. In order to frame this problematization, I would like to share with you some questions I've been raising and been formulating in this exploration. For example, the question about who decides the narratives that we're reading in our classrooms. Another one has to do with the ideologies embedded in those texts and that are consumed somehow by our learners. Another question has to do with the approaches we are using or we are harnessing for teaching literature. And finally, I have been interested in understanding the roles literature learners, particularly pre-service English teachers taking literature courses, are invited to play. Okay, so based on these questions, my answer can give meaningful elements to frame and to understand the problematization. So I remember it was like almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, when I took my first literature course at Universidad Distrital. And actually, the experience was basically the same but was very similar when I took the second course of literature there. I remember reading texts whose contexts were totally distant to me, and I also remember taking part in classroom activities such as horseshoe table, conversations or discussions, um, engaging in reading and endless reading comprehension tasks, and preparing and giving presentations that I had to rehearse a lot because I didn't feel that connected with the topic, with the contents, even sometimes the words of the authors I was reading. And that kind of experiences, those experiences somehow troubled me, and I started to think about how is it that my learning process at the university was marked by alternative perspectives, that advocated for making learning enjoyable and meaningful, but also a transformative experience for students. I didn't make sense of those classes in that same alignment. Then, well, I just decided to stop doing that. I graduated and I started my professional life. And it was just until I became this path of becoming an English language teacher educator when I was assigned to teach a literature course at a private university, that those experiences revived somehow, resurrected, and resurrected in an unexpected way, basically because I found myself at the beginning doing many of those things I used to criticize. And fortunately, some time later, I went back to my readings on critical pedagogy, and I found some meaningful studies as well that informed my perspectives and my practices, and I engaged with my first study into this matter, which is in publication process now. When I have it, I will share it with you. And then I engaged in another study with Professor Wendy Panche, Professor Adriana Gomez, Jairo Castañeda, and Daniela Ponte, Calderon Aponte. And well, basically, what I've been doing here in these research enterprises, along with my colleagues, is thinking about literature and English literature education beyond interpreting text from text-based and canon-based perspectives. So, is it possible for us to offer our learners experiences through which they position themselves as authors and not mere consumers of literature, without that meaning that, well, literature, literary text study has to be crowded out, no? Well, this is basically why we have, or how everything started. And now, in order to understand the construct, how is that I see the construct of hip hop counter storytelling, it's important to understand them separately because they pursue similar goals, but they have been developed by from different perspectives, from different epistemologies, perhaps not that different, but it's important to see how they have operated separately in the social worlds of marginalized communities, in order to understand later how is it that they can connect for making these informed changes I've been talking about happen. So let me introduce you to hip hop. Maybe it is something new to you. If it is not, probably you will feel identified with these verses written by a very well-known artist that is Natch. Actually, he's my idol. In his song El Hip Hop Que Sé, whose verses I have translated here for, for presentation purposes. highlight hip hop as a very nonconformist set of practices that are tied to the street, that disclose, in this case, the harsh realities of people that have been silenced, that have been historically forgotten and exploited. Hip hop is revolution, activism, and resistance. And hip hop has found different means for these purposes to materialize. Maybe you have heard that hip hop has different elements. Well, I want just to briefly address them and stress two of them for the purpose of understanding what I mean by hip hop based counter storytelling. So, hip hop is made up of 5 elements. The first of them you see on the left is DJing, that together or along with the one that is represented by this microphone icon, emceeing, um make up what we understand or what is known as rap music, which is one of its most powerful expressions. Also, in hip hop, we have graffiti, that is part of hip hop, but it's not restricted to it. I mean, it's like a kind of style uh, within this type of art. We also have breakdancing, and the one that is at the core, and I have decided to put it there on purpose, is knowledge. According to KRS-One, one of the most famous rappers in hip hop history, and a teacher, by the way, knowledge is important for hip hoppers because we need to know who we are and why is it that we belong to a global cultural movement, as Alim and Pennycook would call it, for constructing community, for constructing bonds that make us stronger amid the, the hardship that asymmetrical social dynamics can put us in. Okay, so hip hop in this case has different or a diverse ways of expression. And the one I want to bring up for the purpose of this presentation is the combination of MCing and DJing that bring to or give rise to what we know as rap. So I am just going to tell you very briefly some of the principles of rap lyrics. Why? Because the idea is that by the end of the session, you can also, get this spark to maybe using rap, even though it is not your cup of tea in your sessions. And why not make a draw on it to transform your practices? So rap lyrics are characterized by specific patterns of rhythm and flow. For example, um, there is a beat that is particular to rap that is called the 4/4. And in this beat, the verses are expected to rhyme by the end, but also in between, it's important to have this kind of iambic parameter that makes the audience feel engaged with the message. And also we can play with different rhetorical figures like alliteration to make it way more engaging and also to improve the rhythm. Rhyme, as I mentioned before, is central here. A consonant rhyme and assonant rhyme is possible when composing rap lyrics. Wordplay, it's important, as I said before, rhetorical resources are very important here for engaging the audience, but also for transmitting messages in aesthetic ways. Storytelling is a particularly important element as well in rapping. It is through storytelling that we can share with others those experiences that shape our decisions, that shape our identities as well. So I think that's a very powerful element in rapping. And finally, voice and identity. It is in rap music that we can find a space for us to express what we feel, what we do, and who we are. It's important to highlight this feature because, I mean, like, unlike other types of music, hip hop music, rap in this case, is particularly composed by the person that is rapping. Okay, so if you, it's like an untold, let's say like an open secret. If you're a rapper, if you're rapping, it's because you have composed those lyrics, okay? Because that identity component and your voice display there are hold an inseparable relationship, okay? So having said this, the next thing I want to do is to tell you what has been done in hip hop or regarding hip hop in English language education research. And in this case, I offer you here a synthesis of lead review I conducted in the first study I engaged with. And well, I have also included here like my little contributions because they are only like perspectives into this. So far, what I've found is that hip hop is in English language education is an underexplored terrain. But what has been done so far can be classified into two trends or two foci. On the left, we can see studies where we can see also Colombian scholars participating there that draw on hip hop as a pedagogical resource for improving English language learning processes. You know, these studies have found it very practical for you know, vocabulary and grammar instruction, and also for developing language skills like listening and reading. On the other hand, there is a set of an array of other studies that have looked at it from a more critical perspective. These studies have resorted to hip hop power, the hip hop, the power of hip hop, sorry, for boosting identity reconstruction processes within English classrooms. And in this case, it's is note worthy mentioning that some of those studies have focused on students' social issues around them in order for them um, to grapple this from an activist perspective. So they have involved those learners in community-based pedagogies and community wealth practices. So this is what has been done. My invitation is to look at hip hop beyond instrumental purposes because, yes, of course, hip hop and rap music have a plethora of you know, like features that we can use for teaching the structural components of our language, the language we are teaching, that in this case is English. But I am sure we can mobilize more transformative scenarios with it. Now, I would like to tackle the second construct or concept, that is counter storytelling. By counter storytelling, I mean like a set of, I would say, forms, people that has been traditionally, historically marginalized, racialized, discriminated, can resort to in order to cast doubt on those majoritarian or in-group narratives that have been set in many social spheres, including school. So counter storytelling, as Richard Delgado in his seminal work in 1989 puts it, is a way, is a tool that people can use to challenge those ideologies that have been installed by master narratives in discursive acts, so they can open cracks into that reality, and in that way they can also, their voices are foregrounded and can be considered in decision making practices as in the social whole, you know. In this case, it's important to know that counter storytelling has been used in many ways. Has been used as a research methodology mostly because of its connections with critical race theory. Um, but it has also been used in other type of studies within education that concern discrimination, but that do not restrict to race, but to other kind of categories such as class, gender, migration status, among others. And finally, it's important to say that counter storytelling has like an unlimited set of forms to happen. So counter storytelling can take the shape of parables, stories, anecdotes, chronicles, rap music, why not, among others. It is not restricted to any form. According to Laxonville and Santate in 1995, there are many ways we can draw on counter storytelling for making those voices, for bringing those voices to the forefront. And well, it's also necessary to understand how is it that counter storytelling has been addressed in our field. And well, based on the results of a scoping review I am currently conducting, I can tell you that the research that has been done in our field, at least the one that has been that I could retrieve through 4 databases, developed 5 thematic foci. And we can see here in this image, in this illustration, in this diagram, like very important characteristics of this research as well. So let's start by addressing like a very obvious fact, and it is that most of the research studies that have been done have taken place in the United States, which is not surprising, perhaps, because well, critical race theory originated in this country as a response to the multiple um, social asymmetries that many groups like Latinos, Black, Indigenous, Asian people have faced there. Another important thing here is to see how English teachers, both pre-service and in-service, have been researched in these studies, um, asking or positing important questions regarding legitimacy, professional legitimacy in this case, foregrounding experiences of marginalization. But also we can see in these studies tendencies, or let's say focus, foci better, that stress in this case the voices, the lived experiences of Black young learners, families, and refugees. This body of research has been growing in the last few years, and I think it's very important that Colombian ELT scholarship also adopts some of these perspectives for informing our practices, above all, if we want to make them transformative and meaningful in this case. And well, what I am presenting today is just a way to harness this perspective. So far, we have I have presented some of the features of both counter storytelling and hip hop separately, and I think it is time to tell you how is it that I have found it realized or materialized in some research examples I have brought to you. And by the way, I have to say that I have found them, you know, this concept of hip hop counter storytelling is something that inductively emerged from data whose studies were not concerned with counter storytelling, for example. And I want to start by bringing up two excerpts from the first study I conducted about hip hop based productions, through which a group of preservist teachers um, engaged with, or maybe made their critical stances visible. And here, for example, we have Care, a participant that was asked in that class to think about how she makes sense of xenophobia after reading a text by Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca titled The Account. And well, in that text, this is just a fragment, we can see how she narrates the struggles Venezuelan people live in Transmillennium. For example, here she depicts how a Venezuelan migrant was struggling with institutional neglect and with very difficult living conditions that make this person beg for money in the public transport. So he can see here a story that is not the participants, in the sense that she's not um, disclosing, maybe, or she's not showing her own suffering, but is showing another person's. Okay. Very similar in the same study, another student, when was asked about the way she looked at death as a cultural, political, and social issue in Colombia, having read Thanatopsis by William Cullen Bryan in advance, could describe here the very big problem of false positives. And no, well, actually, no one was asking her to do it, but it just emerged. And it was interesting to see here how she depicts a different reality from the one that we explored in William Cullen Bryant's text. Thanatopsis, by the way, is an invitation for us to think about death as an acceptable and accepted, um, fate, something we can escape from and something we shouldn't worry about. But she's describing here a totally different set of circumstances that could make the experiences around death very different. Why not bring these voices up? Okay, so this is another story that we can say is not hers, in the sense that she's not describing her own sufferings, perhaps her own um, experiences. But according to one of the studies I found in counter storytelling, that's been one of the tendencies as well. Counter storytelling In counter storytelling, people can also bring the stories of others as an act of empathy, you know, and this is precisely one of the most powerful reasons why we should take it into account, because we can, we as English language teachers can foster the social changes we have been dreaming about if we can put ourselves in the shoes of others. Okay. In the second study, other fragments, like the ones I'm presenting, emerged. For example, here, participant floor um, shows the reality of innocent children, as she put it, that are obliged to work in the streets selling food, begging for money, and she says that that is unacceptable for her because they deserve to have a different type of, um, let's say, treatment. Maybe they should they should enjoy their lives in a different way. And well, here we have again a perspective into slavery, which was the topic of the class after reading a text by I forgot the name of this wonderful author, Olaudakiano, sorry, the first Black enslaved person writing an experience and a chronicle of this slavery process. So it's something that helped the student make sense of that text, making connections to our own perspective. And finally, on slavery again, another participant, in this case, decided to talk about the work, the work environment nowadays, the working conditions, salaries, as part of subjugation practices that resemble slavery. Slavery was abolished many years ago, but some of its forms continue to exist according to this participant. We can see here descriptions of contracts like cages. We can see chains. We can also see the dress code as part of those practices connected to doing something you don't want to, you know. And this is particularly meaningful because students not only could understand the text and talk about the plot, the characters, but they position themselves as the characters of their own stories. And they could also involve their own plots and the plot twists in this literature exploration. So this is basically what hip hop based counter storytelling can be about, drawing on a format that in this case is hip hop music, in other words, rap lyric composition, in order for students to share their own perspective into social issues they can encounter in literary texts. And by the way, it is an opportunity for them to first look for alternative endings, because we can see those texts as living entities, not as things that are just in a bookcase. But we can see those texts living by making these connections with their lives and their dreams, their aspirations, but also their frustrations, their pain, etc. So I am sorry if you expected like an encyclopedia definition of hip hop based counter storytelling, but what can I tell you is based on the experiences I have had so far. I just want to finish this webinar by talking about some possibilities and implications for our practices in English literature education and beyond, because we can also use this construct in other practices in the realm of English language education. For example, first thing to say is that hip hop and counter storytelling are not the same. I have been I have highlighted this a lot throughout the presentation, and it's basically because counter storytelling can draw on hip hop as one format, but not all hip hop is committed to sharing counter stories. Okay, because well, in hip hop um, we have the freedom to talk about whatever we want. And also we can find here different types of functions like denouncing social injustices without telling stories. We can have here this kind of beefs about between rappers, etc. So I think that it is an important clarification. Another one is that participation in this type of practices should be flexible enough for our students to engage in the composition of rap lyrics, but well, they are not rap artists. So something that experience has taught me is that we can be we can value the effort in engaging with this, mostly because well, they do not necessarily like rap music, hip hop as a culture, etc. It's also important to bridge these texts and the lives of our students. You know, it should this should have like a reciprocal relationship rather than uh, looking at texts as unimportant. It's important that we can balance our practices or keep a balanced set of practices involving both of them, because literary texts also matter. Okay, by the way, this presentation and the perspectives I have been sharing with you today do not contain that exploring the literary texts based on text-centered approaches is entirely negative. I would say that it is also important for our students to understand um, how the plots of stories are developed, the interaction between characters, and the context in which those texts took place, etc. But we should not focus our entire instructional activity on this type of practices. Next one, it's important to keep it real. That is a very hip hop based terminology. Um, we should elicit lived experiences, beliefs, and stances. Okay, so it is important that our students do not feel obliged to do something they don't want to do in this case. And for that to happen, it's important to embrace translanguaging practices. I have found that many times my students engaging in these hip hop based productions have found it difficult to rhyme the verses they compose. So they have sometimes resorted to AI to compose the lyrics. And after reflecting about the importance of keeping it real, they have rebuilt their verses, drawing on Spanish and English, and that is not a problem. You know, we should continue to cast doubt on those monolithic perspectives that have governed our field for so long. Okay, and well, I think that I have reached the end of our presentation. I just want to thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, I will be glad to engage in conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jose, for this amazing topic. I think this is a very engaging topic, as you said before. So I don't know if the audience has, if you have maybe any question or comment. Okay. Okay, Professor Yolanda Samacá.
I'm sorry I can't open my camera, but I like to say it's well to greet everyone here this afternoon. Josue, thank you very much for this thought-provoking presentation because you're presenting literature not only as a monolithic or fixed category, but as a living, dynamic, cultural, social, political situated practice in language education. I think that it's extremely important to recognize that. On the other hand, I would like also to mention that what you're doing with this exploration and understanding hip hop, as a valid literature in our communities, in our context, is it becomes like, like opening a pluriversal space, I think, where different voices, especially of those who have been marginalized, as you mentioned at the very beginning, um, languages, communities are able to compose, are able to perform and circulate different texts, I would say, in ways that challenge the dominant literary norms and ways to understand literature. I found extremely important, that the clarification you made at the end. And it is that your proposal doesn't entail to avoid or invisibilize, the literature constructed so far, but to see that through this possibility, there are other options, for English language education, because that's your focus here. So thank you very much for your presentation. And well, let's see how you continue, like decentering and, this study. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you, dear Yolanda, for your comments.
Okay, so I think we have other comments on the chat. So thanks for sharing your experience in work, Josué, says Professor Felipe Mican. And Professor Angela Patricia says, thank you, Professor, for your presentation and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you, dear colleagues. It's been a pleasure. And of course, it's something that should provoke more questions than answers. So thank you for listening, and I will be very glad to know your perspectives in the next events we're encountering each other. Why not?
Okay, thank you, Professor. I think we don't have more questions so far. So thank you very much. Thanks, the audience, for being here. So see you in the next webinar, the coming webinar. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor.
Congratulations again.
Have an excellent time.
Thank you, Josué.
My pleasure. Goodbye.